Look, Dominic, let's start with probably the biggest news of this week, which is Keir Starmer leaving and Andy Burnham is now going to become the new Prime Minister. With the people that you work with, high net worth individuals and your clients, what do people make? What is the feeling of an Andy Burnham premiership? Is there optimism? Is there fear? What's the feeling with the in the circles that you run in?
Okay, yeah, great. Well, thank you, Kez, for the invitation. So I think if they are clients we're working with around Manchester, then they are optimistic, because he's been the mayor of Manchester now for quite some time, and Manchester is absolutely thriving. The economy is thriving. It's got a great atmosphere about it. So if he can achieve a similar result to what he's achieved in Manchester throughout the UK, I think a lot of people there will be very optimistic. I think generally we're not quite sure what his policies are, what is going to happen, and everything else. So there's a lot of unknowns here. So I think people are, let's wait and see. Some of our wealthier clients have already exited the UK, so they've exited over the last couple of years. But the ones that are here at the moment are potentially optimistic if you're in the northwest, and otherwise they are just let's wait and see what policies come out over the next few months.
What's the reason for some of your clients who have already exited? One of the reasons for them leaving has been increasing taxes, increasing national insurance contributions for businesses, or has it been the uncertainty that Keir Starmer's government had? Because I actually worked for the Labour government for the Labour Party, sorry, for a while, and one of the things that I was really disappointed by, because it felt like the grown-ups were going to be in charge, was how poor the communication was and how everything seemed to come through in drips and drabs, and I could totally understand if you were someone who had a large amount of wealth, looking to plan it, looking to find somewhere to settle down long term, that their strategy of drip feeding things through and being a bit uncertain on things would have been really difficult. And how much was a contributing factor towards people leaving the UK?
Yeah, I think probably a major one. I think a combination of uncertainty around tax and how things were going to change. And so therefore they were able to come up with solutions where they had more certainty, more clarity, and there was, in certain cases, better tax benefits of them going offshore, doing that. Then there was an element of lifestyle. So I think some of the clients have felt that the lifestyle in certain places that they were not happy with, so they felt that they would have a better quality of life somewhere else. But I think, uncertainty and lack of kind of clarity as to what's happening going forwards was a key reason for them to maybe go offshore and deploy their wealth outside of the UK.
And within your day job, you're working with a lot of sports people, and obviously we're coming off the back of a World Cup. When this goes out, we'll know who the world champions are. We're then looking forward to the new Premier League season. Although as a West Ham fan, I'm looking forward to the Championship for the first time in a few years, which is slightly disappointing, but we have some optimism. But in terms of how important the Premier League is to the UK economy, because I think lots of people see the weekly wages, they see the huge amount spent on the broadcast deals, the amount of sponsorships, how ticket prices keep going up despite wages maybe not. How important is the Premier League as a product and as a sport and as an export to the UK, to the rest of the world?
I think it's massive. I think it's one of the most watched leagues in the world. I think if you look at we're spoilt around Manchester with having City, Liverpool, United. So United, one of the most well-known clubs in the world. Everywhere you go, whenever I travel around the world, people are always saying, if you say from Manchester, and they straight away can tell you about the teams, they can tell you about the players. So I think internationally, I think the Premier League is huge. I think it probably generates a colossal amount of revenue. But I also think that when I look at Manchester thriving, I think a lot of that is because of having City and United, and the amount of interest and that all brings is colossal. So I think, and not just looking at what a player gets paid, you kind of need to look slightly wider than that, and you need to look at, well, actually, what do all of these players and the league bring to the economy of the UK, domestically and internationally? And I would say it's colossal.
Do you think there's going to be a time in the future where we're seeing the lower leagues and the English football pyramid, particularly the Championship, because there are some, the Championship quality every year seems to go up and up? And do we think there's going to be a time when the Championship is regarded as maybe a more credible export for the UK? Because obviously there's more games played there, but I mean, our stadium next season is the biggest one in the league, which is a 62,500 seater arena playing in the second tier of English football, which I think, should kind of demonstrate that the league is large. And then you've got these fairy tale stories of, Lincoln City being promoted, and you've then got Luton Town from a few years ago having the back-to-back promotions. So it feels like the stories and the narratives are there for them to be really good products. But do you think that's likely to happen because of the amount of money that the Premier League does have? Is it going to get drip fed down that we'll see?
Well, what about Wrexham?
True.
So you look at the journey of Wrexham and how much revenue that has just brought to Wrexham, how much that's caused, an international kind of news of that. I think that all of it, and I know that the Premier League are always looking at, okay, well, how are they helping the other leagues? How are they helping grassroots football? How are they wanting to maximize the whole community of football? And I know that when we're working with different organizations or players, they're always looking at, well, that's great, we're at the pinnacle of what we do, but that we're only here because of everything that happens in the Premier Leagues and in the grassroots and all the way up. So I think there's a genuine interest, to support all of that, to help all of these. And I think the stories of Wrexham, is a great one, and there's lots of others as well to follow.
But with all, as a West Ham fan, all good things must come to an end, as we found out this season. It could have been a fairy tale. We could have seen Tottenham go down, but it wasn't to be for us. But with all these things, we do have, players retire, people will eventually exit, will have to exit their business. There's obviously the role and the job that you do will be to kind of help these people in that transition when they're entering that next phase in life. You mentioned off air before we started about the influence that your dad had on helping you kind of put into perspective about how we should maybe start to look at our lives a bit differently, maybe kind of goal led, and what our legacy is going to be, beyond work. Would you mind just talking a bit more about kind of what that process was like, and kind of how that's now shaped you moving forward, and how that then helps your clients?
Yeah. So I suppose if we try and link it together with maybe the football players, when you're talking about transitioning. So if you look at some of the Premier League football players, they know on average they have a 7-year career, and on average they can earn up to £14 million over that 7-year period. And then a lot of them then are retiring from football in their late 20s, early 30s. And then they have to work out what they're doing next. And if I look at my father's experience, he wasn't a footballer. He was a farmer from the Lake District, but in his late 20s, he inherited some wealth from his family. He was an only child, so he inherited some wealth. And at the point of inheriting that wealth, he didn't have access to a brilliant team that were going to guide him to make good decisions. And so he was guided by people who didn't have the appropriate skill sets, ability, knowledge, experience, or maybe even the intentions, because they were in a sales role. And the consequences of that is that my father lost nearly all of the inheritance that he had over a period of time. He didn't maybe take care of himself as much as he should have done. And earlier than he should, he became poorly and then ultimately died of pancreatic cancer. And off the back of that, I needed to have a little bit of counselling for grief, which is totally fine. We all in our lives can experience grief, and through that whole process of having some counselling to understand grief, it became very clear to me that it's really important to understand what matters to you and why. It's really important for you to understand what your core values are. It's about making decisions then that align with your priorities and values, and it's about having a brilliant guide to keep you on track. And that's no different with the football players, the business owners, any of us in life, is that when we're working with football players, either when they're playing or when they're looking to retire, is we say, okay, other than football, what matters most to you in life and why?
It must be a bit backwards for footballers, because if you're just a regular person who's going to work to 65, you probably have kind of three massive life kind of periods in your life where things can change, where you might take financial advice. And I think the first one is always tricky, but maybe in your late 20s or early 30s, when you're getting married, having children, start a family, that might be where you start to think about buying a property, writing a will to make sure they're protected, taking out life insurance. Then people, and I think it's on average, people tend to be around 55 to 65 when they receive inheritance from when their parents die, which is obviously a little bit earlier than when they might look to retire. But then you have that conversation of, we've received a chunk of money and then I'm going to retire. So then you have these people who probably a bit too late are taking advice on kind of what they want the future to look like. And I've had conversations with financial advisors and financial plans before, which has been like, at what point do you want to speak to people? Because the goals that you have in your late 20s, where you might be a couple or just starting a family, might be really different from what you're looking to trying to do when you're 50, 55, 60. How do you work with your clients? And because these clients working in sport and then clients in business, they must be of all age ranges and different life experience and at different times. How do you help them go through that journey of realizing what they want their legacy to be, what they want what they want life to be post work? Because that must be really difficult for people who have maybe been in something 100% for 10, 15, 20 years, to then take them out of that must be a challenge for them.
Yeah. So high performing athletes are slightly easier in some ways because they are used to being coached. So they love to be coached. They love systems and processes, and they love consistency. And so actually when you're working with, and they also now are far more aware that their careers are going to their first career, which could be whatever sport they play, could come to an end in their 30s. So they also are thinking ahead as to, well, what am I going to do in my late 30s, 40s or 50s? And so many more now kind of are thinking about that well before it happens. So they in some ways they buy into the process a lot easier because they are used to processes. They are used to having to perform at a high level. Again, if you're working with anybody that's a business owner looking to transition, maybe looking to sell the business in the next 3 to 5 years, the starting point always has to be, well, what do you want life to look like once you're no longer in the business? And why is that inspiring? And why is it authentic to you and your family? And so you can just ask them Okay, share with me what the next week looks like when you've sold your business, the next month, the next year, and why does that excite you? And as sometimes people struggle on that, so you can then go back a little bit more and you can say, okay, what I want you to do is I just want you to write down on a piece of paper the 8 most important things in your life. What are the things that you are most grateful for? And we can do that, you could do that now, and you're kind of, have a young family, and I can do it, and I'm, a bit further down the road than you. But actually, both of us, even though some of them will change, I know that some of the things that I would have written in my 20s are still the things that I would write as I approach 60. So they don't all change. There's some of them are a little bit more fluid. So it's about understanding what matters and why. And it could be, a common one that we get time and time again is family. So what does family mean to you, and why is it important? And then making sure that your decision making aligns with the importance of family. And then if you also know a client's core values, that really helps, because that helps you eliminate solutions that are not appropriate, or it helps you understand the client in more detail, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to really understand the client and why whatever matters to them matters. And then you're wanting to educate them on the consequences of their decision making, so that they have a very high level of peace of mind when they make that decision.
It must be, because of the caliber of people you deal with, while it might not be easy to win them as clients, it must be quite straightforward to know who you're going after as clients. High performing athletes, people who run successful businesses. I think that one of the things that ordinary people might struggle with, and particularly those who maybe haven't built up significant amount of assets yet, or in the beginning of their career, can be where they can turn to get good advice and good guidance. We were talking beforehand about some kind of principles that you think kind of fit across both, and I think with the stats that came out about a month or two ago from the pensions regulator, it's only about 9% of people are saving adequately for their pension. But then I have this feeling that even for those people who are saving adequately, they might not even know where they want to spend their pension. They might just be saving because they just want to build as big a pot as possible. And for those who aren't saving enough, haven't got an idea of what retirement might look like, and therefore can't work backwards to know what they should be putting away every month. So what are your kind of principles that you're telling these high net worth individuals that you think also, when it comes to guidance and advice, are also going to work for people who will have a career until they are in their 60s?
Yeah. Okay. So, irrelevant of your wealth, the process that seems to work really well for us and for our clients is, firstly, work out what your priorities are. So we can all do that, irrelevant of our wealth. Work out your values, and also work out what your dreams and aspirations are for the retirement you might want to have. So to give you an example, we had a business owner who was looking to sell his business, and we didn't really want to know how much he was selling his business for, but tell us exactly what you're going to do, what you want your retirement to look like. You can take that conversation, you can reverse engineer that conversation, and you can then cash flow that from when you retire to when you're 100 years old. And then you can do a load of assumptions, which you can either probably get on the internet or go onto our website and have a look at that. And that can tell you what amount of wealth you need to be able to deliver the lifestyle you want. So whatever you're building up in your pension, you want to know, whatever the wealth is that it's enough for the lifestyle you want to live. And then sometimes, that's quite tricky for you to be able to answer all of those questions on your own. And that's why you might want to engage a financial planner to help you get clarity, confidence, and help you to make great decisions. And so if you're doing that, for the clients that we serve, we would always turn around and say, find somebody who's chartered. You want them to be chartered because that just demonstrates their academic knowledge of the subject matter. So pretty straightforward now. So when you're trying to search for anybody to guide, make sure that the company, the individual, is a chartered financial planner. You then want to turn around and say, well, ideally, I'd like them to be independent. I don't want them to have any influence to sell me a product. I want them to offer me guidance that is right for me and my family. I don't want it to be influenced because that organization has to sell me a product. So chartered and independent. And then the final one, which is quite difficult to find, but if you can, see if you can find an organization that charges you a fixed fee that is based on the time, complexity, and value they add. Because if you do that, you give yourself the greatest possible chance of having a guide who is non-conflicted, who will help you will educate you to make really good financial decisions, which align for you and your family. They're not aligned for their benefit for yourself. So if you can find an organization that has those three, then you're on the right track. And then the next thing is well, hopefully, do they have experience and understand what you're going through? If you're selling a business, if you're a high performing athlete, do they understand your world? But if you do that to start with, you should then have somebody who will be able to guide you and will add huge value to your life.
So just to touch back on fixed fee, a lot of financial advisors will charge a percentage of your portfolio, as an advisory fee, which can be it can be attractive if you're earlier on in your career, maybe, trying to get that advice quite, and you don't have a huge amount to spend, and, a fixed fee might be, a couple of £1,000 that you might not be able to afford just yet. But as you go through your working life and into retirement, why does that fixed fee element become important for people as they're starting to build wealth, particularly as it's compounded throughout their working life?
Yeah. Okay. So you're spot on there, Kez, in that sub about £500,000 of total investables, you potentially can go and pay a percentage. And if you're just looking at the money, £500,000, it's fixed fee or percentage, there's not a huge difference in it. The moment that you start to accumulate more than that, well, then the differentiation between the value for money becomes quite considerable. And what you, as an example to maybe give on that would be, is that if you have a pension fund and at the time of retirement, let's say 50 or 60, that pension fund has a value of £1 million. Probabilities, hopefully, is that you've still got another 25 or more years to live. So if you go for an identical pension, identical wrapper, identical fund, so nothing to do with fund performance or anything else, you just purely look at the difference between paying a percentage or paying a fixed fee. The difference in the value of your pension fund of £1 million pension over 25 years is £1.2 million. So that means the effect of paying a percentage because of compound return means that your pot of money could be worth £1.2 million less than what it would be if you went down a fixed fee route. And therefore, that can have a huge influence on what you do in retirement and what your cash flow is and everything else. The quality of the advice should be, or the product could be exactly the same if it's the right one. And also, if you're paying a fixed fee, there is no conflict of interest. That if I am rewarded, or if our organization is rewarded by you keeping your money within a portfolio, that potentially might influence the decision making that we offer. Whereas if the guidance has there's no correlation whatsoever with your decision making, then for us, that means that the guidance is non-conflicted.
And I suppose even if you're not, at the stage where you're really heavily looking into your pension or advice yet, there's still lessons you can take for the sort of products that people might invest in via their ISA, because obviously there are fees attached to every investment product you buy, and the higher the fee on a particular product, you know, from a particular provider, the more that's going to eat into your potential returns.
Yeah, and we were talking earlier on, if you go back 30 years or so ago, the economy was booming, the markets were going up by more than 10% every single year. So, you know, clients were doing very well. If you're now in an economy where the growth is not quite as much, the returns not quite as much, it's really important for you to be aware of and keep a track of the fees that you're paying. So you need to be looking, you know, on your platform fees, your custodian fees, your fund management fees, all of those. Now, it's really important that you see the value in paying a fee, because you will get tremendous value. But what you don't want to be doing is to paying excessive fees, because those excessive fees can have a real drag on your returns. And when the economy is not growing at scale, you need to be very aware of that drag. So you want absolute transparency, and then, you know, do some AI searching or whatever to make sure you're getting value for money, because that can have a huge influence on your long-term wealth.
In terms of the people that you work with, you know, some hugely successful people who have had, you know, wonderful careers, built a large amount of wealth. Would you say there's kind of any common traits that these people have?
Yeah, I think I had a business owner on the other day, and it was a fascinating conversation because he is very successful in business. But the call we had is he asked an unbelievable amount of questions about financial services and wealth management. And I found that really insightful, that even though he is successful at business, he was curious to understand how wealth management and financial planning could help him on the next journey. And so we had a conversation, and it was an endless of, how does this work? Why is that appropriate? Explain that to me. Where are the benefits? So most of the clients we work with who are materially successful and you know, run businesses or even high performing, they are extremely curious to really understand the relationship, the dynamics of the relationship, and how that relationship can add value for them and their families.
You often hear, particularly with maybe footballers of years gone by, about, you know, people who are, you know, persuaded to join a particular, you know, investment scheme or put money somewhere that all went awry. Do you think there's that idea of having a trusted team around you has become more important, particularly people who are in the public eye as well, because, you know, you've got, you know, people can, what's the phrase, slide into your DMs. So there's people now have almost a bit more distrust of people they don't know. So having a trusted team around you is more important than it ever has been.
Yeah. Life's far quicker and more complex than it used to be. Again, with a lot of the people we're working with, we will build a team around them. So we will build a team. So we will make sure that they've got a really great, you know, legal representation, great accountancy representation. If they need reputational management, we make sure they've got somebody fantastic for that. And with then, you know, if there's wealth management or banking or travel, whatever it might be, it's having a really good team around you. But you've got to be very careful. You've got to make sure that the foundations of that team are right. Because if you get a brilliant team in place, there is an element of self-policing. So if anybody comes into that space and looking after the family or looking after the high-performing athlete, if somebody comes into that space with the wrong intention, or with an intention for it to serve them, not the client, that gets picked up by all the other people who are advising. So it's, but what you have to be careful of is that the room isn't full of everybody who is just self-serving, So I've been into spaces before where I've gone into a room and everybody in that room sees it as an opportunity for them to have some of the success of the high performing athlete or the high performing business person. So you have to make sure that the values and the behaviors of your team are always focused on the client.
And I suppose what people also would like to know about, particularly those who have had a huge amount of success, whether that be on the pitch or in the boardroom, but when these people get to the end of their careers, are there any regrets that people have, and any common regrets as well? Because I think, as we talked about earlier, having that idea of being able to zoom out on life and really trying to understand what you want from life, I think is a fantastic exercise. So you must have people there who are like, oh, what, I wish I'd done this. And would there, any regrets you think, that people who maybe are earlier on in their careers could learn a lesson or two from?
So generally, most people's regrets is not spending enough time on the things that matter most to them. So again, that's why we perceive it's really important to do that exercise of understanding your priorities. So a common one, which we've already mentioned, is the importance of family and the amount of times more business owners than athletes, because athletes are retiring younger. But if you look at a business owner who's maybe spent 20 or so years in their business and doing whatever, and then they sell their business, and one of their biggest regrets is they didn't spend enough time with their children or their partner, or they didn't see their friends and family because they were so busy building up their business. But actually, what mattered more to them than anything else was having a good relationship with their children. So, and also an element of, wasting time and energy on things that didn't matter and not focusing on things that do matter. So this is why at the start of any relationship we have with a client is to say, okay, great, well, let's just identify what matters. So we can make sure that when we're meeting you and we're having reviews, we want to make sure that your time, energy, and focus is on the things that matter, not being distracted on the things that don't matter. And so we want, the scenario is that when the journey comes to an end, we want you to have a feeling of brilliant. I did absolutely everything that mattered to me. And to give you can I share with you a little analogy which your listeners might appreciate? But I went to a funeral in late last year. It was a celebration, so it wasn't a sad affair. And after the funeral, one of the family members came up to me and just said, I just want to thank you and the team at Xentum for giving mum and dad the confidence to live the life they've lived for the last 30 years. They've traveled the world, they've given money to charity, they've given money to their children, they've done absolutely everything that they wanted to do. And they would have never done it if somebody hadn't have given them the confidence and created the plan for them to do it. Well, that to me that's success. There was no conversation around saving them tax or making them a higher return or anything else. It was, you helped somebody that we love to have the most fantastic experience of a human being, and you gave them the clarity to know what matters and the confidence to do it.
I think that's one of the biggest issues producing any kind of finance content, which is everyone, the sexy headline of the return is always, the thing that drives people in. But if you don't have a goal, if you don't have, what's this going to be used for, it can be very hollow and very difficult to have purpose in it, because I'm sure we've all seen the Hollywood movies of the relative pauper who has a very happy life with their family. And I think there's I'm not sure if it's a joke or an anecdote, but the idea being, which is, if if you're a fisherman, you can borrow some money to buy better equipment, new equipment. Then you can move into a factory. Then you can process your own fish, and you can can your own fish. And then in 30 years' time, you can sell your business, where you can spend time with your family, fish whenever you want, read stories with your children. And the fisherman replies and says, yes, but as a fisherman earning enough as I need to in a day, I can fish when I want. Spend time with my family. And I think it's very important for people, and this is probably what feeds back into what you're saying about getting advice and doing those exercises to see what is truly important to you, and having that ability to zoom out. If you were to speak to someone at the beginning of their career, they might not know whether they want to even go to university or anything like that. They're a blank canvas, but you were to impart some knowledge, on them, which is more broad than just about money. And what would you say to that individual?
Two things. One would be, if you can find yourself somebody who is willing to act as a mentor or a coach, I think that would be hugely valuable. I think that you can, if you're in your 20s and you're just starting out, find somebody who is a little bit further down the track and see whether they can offer you some guidance. Because if I look back, having a coach or a mentor can help unbelievably to make sure that you are kept on track. And I think even in your 20s, it is a continual process. It's even in your 20s, writing down what matters and why, and what you're looking to achieve over the next 6, 12 months, next 2 years, 3 years. We've got a 19-year-old son, and he's off to London on Monday for a job interview. And on a number of occasions, I've just said to him, okay, just scribble down on a piece of paper what matters to you and why, and let's have a conversation about it. So in some ways, I'm trying to act a little bit like a mentor or a coach to him, to say, great, well, if these things matter, direct your time and energy to things that matter, and don't waste your time and energy on things that don't. And then just to your earlier point, Kez, which I think is worth saying, is that it's really important, if you know your dreams and aspirations, values and priorities, and then you understand how the financial solution is going to deliver what it is that matters to you. So there is correlation as to, okay, well, why am I putting money into this product? Well, the reason I'm doing it is because the result of that decision is that it's going to deliver me X, Y, or Z, and that is going to allow me to achieve 1, 2, 3, 4 things that matter to me in life. That means then you're more committed to the process. You understand why you're doing it. So actually you have a better feeling of financial well-being, because you understand, rather than I'm just piling money into a pension because somebody told me to do it, but I have no reason, I have no understanding why I'm even doing it.
It's one of those things, because obviously working in public relations, it can be, I always feel there's two diametrically opposing reasons why I love it, which is sometimes it really matters because it's good to get stories out there that people need to know about, and it's also such a weight off my shoulders knowing that actually it doesn't really matter sometimes. The press release I'm writing actually is fairly it's not going to change anybody's life, and because of that is no burden of responsibility. So sometimes there's a nice feeling there of being able to do both. But when it does come down to speaking about the importance of zooming out to assess your goals, seeing what actually matters to you, and I think also doing that exercise as couples, I think, is probably quite a good thing as well, to make sure that you're both aligned. And
sorry, just a bit. The best way to do that, if I can, because I've tried this over hundreds and hundreds of times, is do it individually to start with. So there is no influence by either cut by either one of you to put something in. So basically, go into a separate room or a separate space, do it separately. And again, you can, ask us and we'll send you the exercise through so I can share it, but do it separately and then come together and then look at which ones you share and look at which ones you don't. And that's totally fine, but it'll give you an insight to what matters to your partner, and your partner an insight that matters to you, and therefore they're likely to be more empathetic to understand your decision making.
And that's really important because I've been using Sprive, which is like a cashback app, and all the cashback goes towards overpaying the mortgage. And my wife always goes, "Why'd you go through this? It adds like another few minutes." I said, because for every pound I'm paying off this mortgage now, I'm not paying back to the bank in interest. So it's and it's only when you are able to have the conversation, be like, okay, and then answering that why question, why am I doing this? Why am I putting time into this product? Of going, well, if that individual pound, £100, £1,000, whatever it is, I'm not paying interest on, is time saved at the other end, is time I potentially don't need to work, so because the mortgage is the biggest outgoing. And it was only when we had that conversation where she goes, oh, okay, that's fair, because I think I'm very happy working. I enjoy working. If I go to 67, 68, I'm, pretty content with me. I know my wife would like to finish at 60 because she would rather not be working. So for me, being able to say, well, if I pay the mortgage off early and I want to keep working, no issue, but you can stop early. Then she goes, I'll use Sprive. So if we've got, if people want to find out more about you, more about the business, I always offer people the 1 minute pitch opportunity. Where can people find you? And if they want to get in touch with you, how can they?
Yeah, great. So I'm the CEO of a company called Xentum, which is Xentum. You'll be able to just find us on the internet. So if you just go on the internet, xentum.co.uk, or if you're on LinkedIn, just look up Dominic Baldwin, CEO of Xentum, and feel free to connect with me. And as a business, we are 22 years old, which I set up 22 years old, but I have been involved in financial planning for 35 years. And the whole purpose of what we do is that we look to be exceptional guides to families, to help families consistently make really good financial decisions which align with their priorities and values. Super simple. We're chartered, we're independent, we're fixed fee. It's all about, can we have a positive influence on your experience of a human being, and can we help you make great decisions? So if any of that resonates, we'd love to hear from you. And if not, just have a look at some of the resources on our website, or there might be some testimonials that resonate, which gives you an idea as to how to make good decisions yourselves.